Hello, Matt Elliott here.
Hi, Alan Smith here.
Hey guys, Ian Hume here.
Hi everybody, Jerry Taggart here.
Be sure to watch
Chris and Leicester Till I Die TV
For all the latest Leicester City news and information.
You can also subscribe on YouTube and various social media channels.
for the latest updates and news on Leicester City Football Club.
Come on, you foxes!
Happen in 49, 61, 63 or 69 when they reach the final. But the class of 2021 have delivered. Leicester City are FA Cup winners at last and are history makers at Wembley.
They have blown their rivals away. They have blown us all away in truth. Premier League champions 2016. The amazing Leicester City!
Leicester Till I Die TV. Your first choice for everything Leicester City. Tune in and join in now.
Right, Chris. All right, how are we all? Or how the devil are we, should I say? I'm going to say sorry now in case I keep saying good evening, because as you know, my life is very much in Dracula mode, and I tend to come out at night and there's actually sunshine outside and my body's going, what the hell is that? You know, so forgive me for that. It is Leicester Till I Die TV. We are available on YouTube at the aforementioned Leicester Till I Die TV. Please get over there, give us a sub and smash those likes button. And if you're listening to this on catch up on podcast, Amazon, Apple iTunes, Google, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and your favourite podcast platform, thank you very much for listening as well. Here's where you can find us.
Watch us on YouTube. Listen on your favourite podcast platform or ask your smart speaker to play the podcast Leicester Till I Die.
Subscribe, like, follow, and join in now.
Broadcasting live worldwide.
Hello, we have got a few hellos here. Luckman, I'm not even going to attempt to say that. And you know what I'm like. If a player's not called Smith or Jones, I struggle. Big up, thanks for popping in. I won't be able to stay because he's got his own show coming up. But, well, thanks a lot for popping in. Douglas, how the devil are you, sir? Welcome along. Must be happy after last night, Liverpool winning. It's great. I tell you what, this of course is the In Conversation With show, and it's always great to get what I like to call professional people on, because of course we just play at this. And of course, if they support Leicester City, it is always a bonus. And I'm sure this guy that's going to join us in a minute, he works BBC Radio Leicester. You may well have heard him. He's on BBC talkSPORT BBC Sport 5 Live a lot, and he's also obviously at talkSPORT. So let's welcome in Mike McCarthy. Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, Chris. You well?
Yes, I'm well. Thank you very much. I hope you are too.
I've been having a good week so far.
Yeah, well, I'll ask you again maybe on Friday after we've
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm just thinking talkSPORT. is it? It's Jeff Peters that talks. But do you have a bit of a Leicester get together if you're in the office at the same time?
Well, you know what? I've never been to the talkSPORT offices. I am completely divorced from all that. Although I do see Jeff from time to time in press boxes around the country because we often cover the same games for different broadcasters.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, he's a great guy, Jeff, and obviously he's former Radio Leicester as well. And in fact, there are so many former Radio Leicester people who are now big in the media. If you think of Manish Bhasin, he can't go anywhere in the Indian subcontinent because he's on Premier League TV all the time.
Exactly,
BBC Radio Leicester, but you know he's massively famous everywhere. And there's so many names you could think of. Ian Carter's from Radio Leicester in the past, and there's so many others.
Jason Bourne.
As well, Jason Bourne, who's doing brilliant things with talkSPORT at the moment.
Yes.
I mean, you know, the list goes on and on and on. So Leicester's a great patch to work on your sport, and there's many people who've gone on to do great things afterwards as well.
For those of us that are old enough to remember, and you're much too young, I'm sure, of course, Radio Leicester was the first ever local BBC radio station. So it has got a good history there. Now, you are a Leicester fan. And you know what it's like being a Leicester fan. It's a roller coaster ride, as they say, and we've had some good times, we've had some bad times. At the moment, we may be going through a bit of a dip, but generally speaking, we've never had it so good, have we?
Oh, these are good times. Yes, it does feel like, you know, this season has been a little bit of a disappointment in certain aspects, but we are in the good times as Leicester fans. I mean, my first game was Boxing Day 1993, and it finished Leicester 4, Watford 4, and immediately I was hooked. You know, last minute equaliser, absolutely glorious. And you know, from that day on, you know, I was a Leicester City fan, and I've followed them ever since. You know, it took me ages until I saw a game with more goals in it than that. So I've just been chasing that high, basically. I think it was the Spurs game at Wembley, which ended up, was it 5-4 in the end? I can't remember.
Yes,
which is actually, it was. I'm
going to say, following Leicester, you must have seen it at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it's been, you know, many ups and downs, but I kind of came in at one golden era with Martin O'Neill and the wonderful times with Leicester there, and then obviously through the mid 2000s, which we won't talk about too much because they were largely depressing, and then obviously the revival under Nigel Pearson, and then of course the Premier League and European football under Brendan Rodgers as well. I mean, it's been a wonderful experience the last few years. So I don't think it's we are definitely in good times as Leicester fans, even if it doesn't feel like it right now.
No. Obviously, that's going to be the main topic of the show. But you made me feel very old now, because my first game I remember seeing was the Manchester City Cup final.
Oh wow!
Yes. Well, I remember. I've got this memory of it, but I don't. I think I was 8 or 9 at the time. So. And then my first match at Filbert Street, the grand old lady of Filbert Street, was we entertained, I think it was Red Star Belgrade, as they were then. And they just beat Nottingham Forest, who were European champions, and we beat them. It was a pre-season friendly, and like you say, they were coming over as this big European team. They couldn't to Barcelona because they were huge in the day. And Melrose got 2 goals. I remember somebody stopping me going home and said, "Oh, did you go to the match? What was the score?" I said, "Oh, 3-1, or I think it was." "Oh, we didn't lose that badly then." I went, "No, we would." And he went, "What?" But yes, it's
well, that's the thing with being a Leicester fan. Generally, it's low expectations, and you're happy, pleasantly surprised generally. But things have flipped in the last few years, and expectations are a little bit different now.
They have, and I think. And we were talking about this before we came live. I mean, if you look, I've always said, if you look football up in the dictionary, it just says fickle. And, you know, I speak to a lot of, you know, I'm speaking to some Arsenal fans later in the week before the game, and I have done before. And like the Arsenal fans are sort of saying we don't want to be in the Europa Conference because we should be in the Champions League. Well, we should be. I should be going out with El McPherson, but I'm not. You know, it's if only. But you know what I'm saying. And I think it's all well with Man United, and as good as they have been, there's so many fans that weren't born before then.
And it's it's amazing what football fans think things the way things should be going. And that has become more, I guess, more firmly established since the impact of money and big business in the game, and football becoming more stratified, and it being the existence of first a big four and then a big six. And that, those sorts of things go along with that territory. If you're pouring all this money in, then surely X, Y, or Z should happen. But thankfully, football is not quite like that just yet.
No, I mean, you mentioned it there, and it is a bugbear with fans of clubs like Leicester. Is that well, like this weekend? I mean, Sky Sports were in their element. They had a Manchester derby. I don't know why any other game was bothered being played for Sky. We do, and we get it that there are, I suppose, the six clubs, because there was never the big six before Sky, but it's always, we watch it and we think, like, if we're playing before, we hardly get a mention because they're talking about Liverpool, Man United, whoever afterwards. Obviously, in our minds, it exists, but do you feel like as a presenter that it's any different if there's a big Manchester derby on?
I think it's just in terms of levels of interest, and as much as we as Leicester fans would love, the big Sunday afternoon game to be Leicester, Forest or whatever, and that being the one that the whole nation pays attention to. Unfortunately, most of the time it's not that. This is where the fan bases are because of the size of these clubs now, and the amount of marketing power and all sort of the bits and pieces they're able to pull in. So football's kind of financial gravity is pulling it that way, and I think the media just reflects that trend rather than necessarily creating it.
Yes, no, I can see that. And I mean, it's this club, like I say, we are going through such an amazing. If you'd have said years ago, and I hate to be one of these fans that, well, I was there at Yeovil on a Tuesday night in the rain. I hate being one of those, but we are going through such a. I never thought in my lifetime I would see my club win the Premier League, and I remember, funny enough, I remember being on talkSPORT that night on the sports bar, absolutely drunk, and I'm not going to, I don't know how I got.
Is there a recording out there somewhere?
Yes. No, I was just at home, but I was knocking it back, like, obviously, with the Chelsea Tottenham game. But, when I watched the FA Cup, I couldn't get a ticket. My son came round, and, he's 26, I'm sort of 60 now, and we were watching the game. And at the end of the game, when the final whistle went, I had to turn away from him because I was crying. And, he looked at me, or he turned around and said, like, oh, God, we've done it. And I turned around and he was crying as well. It's just those moments you get, and, listen to that, Champions League music. It shouldn't be happening to a club like Leicester.
No, I completely get that. And that is what makes those moments so special. And I guess, you don't want to become one of those clubs where there is that sense of entitlement, and that if you're not winning trophies year after year after year, then somehow it's the end of the world. Football and these moments are special, and that moment for you was so special because it was so rare. And it that's why it meant so much, and that's why it's such a great sporting story. So I hope football continues to have that, and this is why people were so up in arms about things like the European Super League. The idea that the further entrenchment of 6 clubs in this country and a few others around Europe would just continue to dominate, and that would be it. There would be no openings for the stories that we've had the pleasure of experiencing over the last few years.
I mean, I think that season when we won it, I mean, I live down here in Poole. I work in Bournemouth, and I was, I'd be walking around with my jacket on that had Leicester on it, and people were coming up to me. And I remember going into the bank one day, and she said, "Oh, Leicester City." She said, "Vardy and Mahrez." I went, "Yeah." I said, "Which team do you support?" She said, "Oh, I don't like football," but she knew that. And I think we gave all the clubs of our size, similar and maybe smaller, that belief that the dreams can sometimes come true.
Yeah, certainly. And it's now interesting, isn't it, that every kind of big sporting upset story is compared to Leicester City winning the Premier League. That is now the benchmark by which all other major sporting shocks are measured. And it's so difficult to think of too many examples of anything like that being, potentially happening again, and that is what makes that story so remarkable. It was such a freak compared to what football had experienced for the last essentially 30 years. I mean, we're extremely lucky to be in these times and to have experienced it.
And our achievement was better than Forest when they came up and did it, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, I can. Yeah, and again, it comes down sadly to money, but frankly, the divergence of cash in the old First Division in the late 1970s, early 80s was nowhere near what it was now, what it is now, and football has become so stratified that what Leicester did was just extraordinary. And this is not to take away anything from double European champions. I mean, it is an incredible achievement what Nottingham Forest did, but I do think that in the context of the hurdles that Leicester had to go across to get to what they got in 15-16, I don't think it's as good as what Leicester did.
And I think it was the fact that it followed on from the season before. We didn't have to sort of just stay up and avoid relegation and then sit mid-table for a couple of seasons and then win it. It wouldn't have been such a big story. But no. I had a season ticket for the Great Escape year, and it's like a 7.5-hour return journey for every game to see us lose. But that was the side, and sometimes I don't feel that it's quite the same now. But those players, they would give the blood on the pitch. You knew that they were fighting. We never got lost by more than 1-0 or 2-1. We were never sort of massacred in that time, but there was always that passion there.
Yeah,
which I think probably came from Nigel Pearson, in fairness.
Oh yeah, and he deserves so much credit as well for the squad that he built. And I was having a conversation with literally. I live in Sheffield, and we had a builder come round to the house yesterday because we're trying to get some work done. And mentioned I was a Leicester fan, and he said, "Oh yeah, Nigel Pearson, he built that team, didn't he?" And I think that is something that literally is embedded in the minds of a lot of people about that Leicester story. That yes, Claudio Ranieri came in and did wonderful things, but the clay was certainly moulded by Nigel Pearson to get the ball rolling there. It's to mix metaphors slightly.
He was a different manager though, wasn't he? I mean, I met him. I mean, a couple of times. I mean, at the Bournemouth game, I was because I lived down in Bournemouth. I was having to sit in the sort of the Bournemouth side, just behind the dugouts, and he saw that I was a Leicester fan. He came over and he chatted. Lovely guy. But those press conferences, I don't know if you were in any of them at all, but they were something else.
I only ever interviewed Nigel Pearson once. It didn't go very well. So it was one of my first post-match interviews. I think it was literally the week after Leicester had beaten Manchester United 5-3. Incredible game. And they went to Crystal Palace, and they were distinctly ordinary, barely got a shot on goal all game, lost it 2-0, were not very good. And I think my first question to Nigel Pearson was, Nigel, was that a bit of a reality check after last week? And he said, for who? And I thought at this point, this is not going well. The interview didn't really improve from there, to be perfectly honest. A lot of lessons learned for me in my early broadcast journalism career in how to conduct those things. So, take that hit and move on.
Yes. And unfortunately, we'll always be remembered for that. But we can laugh at it now. But looking at this season, like we said, whether I think we probably become victims of our own success, and that fans, like I say, do expect more. The better you do, the more you want. But looking at these figures, I don't know if you're able to see these very well or not. But this is just comparing this season with the last 2 seasons since Brendan took over, and after 25 games, there's a hell of a lot of difference there, isn't there? And I suppose the biggest one for me, and it ties in with everything else that's happened this season, is the goals against.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is something that will have come up so many times on the show. Is the amount of injuries, particularly defensively, that Leicester have had to contend with, is something that would affect any side in the Premier League. No Johnny Evans for pretty much most of the season. No Fofana until very, very recently, and hopefully he's going to be involved in the next week or so. We will wait and see. Soyuncu's not been in the best form. Ricardo's been in and out. James Justin's only just come back and then has got injured again. I think that, and I know people don't like, coming up with the same sort of reasons why this is happening to Leicester City, and they kind of want a different answer, but I feel like the answer is the same because the reasons are the same. Leicester City's defensive injury problems are just huge, and that is the direct consequence of that. What I guess can't be excused quite so easily is the amount of goals that Leicester City are conceding from set pieces, and that is certainly something that continues to be a major worry. And even though they've escaped with clean sheets against Burnley and Leeds, that is not necessarily down to the set piece defending being necessarily much better. They may have got away with a few things against Leeds United, even had they lost 2-1 against Leeds. Could we really have complained that much? And that sort of that sort of thing is also there to contend with. So maybe they're just getting a bit of luck. And the harder you work, the luckier you get, and all that sort of, you can roll that cliche out as well. But thankfully, Fofana's on his way back. Maybe Johnny Evans isn't too far away, for the run in as well. And of course, having Jamie Vardy back too is a huge boost because you take the best striker out of any side in the Premier League, and they're going to struggle for a couple of months.
Indeed. I am worried that we are putting so much pressure though on Fofana that when he comes back, we expect that suddenly, hey, we're going to be in a title challenge again.
Well, isn't it funny how the best players, when you're doing badly, the best players are the ones that aren't playing. And that is the same, at any football club. But it's not just Leicester. I mean, I've had the privilege when I left Radio Leicester, I went to Radio Sheffield and hosted a phone-in. They do a phone-in called Football Heaven, which is 5 nights a week. For an hour, and it covers Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, Rotherham, Barnsley, Doncaster, Chesterfield, and then on a Saturday the phone is called Praise or Grumble, and most of it is grumbling, which is what you expect from a football phone-in. But it is the same with fans wherever you go. If you've lost the game, why is player X, Y, or Z not playing? They would have been better. This injury, that injury is hugely damaging. And to a certain extent, it's correct. And to a certain extent, you've got to wonder whether is there anything else that could be done in each situation. But it's certainly not unique to Leicester in terms of that. And in terms of going back to your original question for Fofana, I know what you mean. However, when James Justin came back, I appreciate again he's got another knock, and it's going to be a little while before we see him again. But he seemed to step right back into his stride pretty quickly. I'm pleased to say that is good evidence that when Leicester are getting players back, they are coming back.
I think it depends on the. I mean, Maddison, I think, took a while to settle back in. Like you say, James Justin was like he'd been on holiday for 2 weeks. But I mean, Brendan's not really come out and said about the injuries? And quite often when I'm doing opposition shows, they're like, what? You've had how many defenders injured? He hasn't used that as an excuse. Whereas probably like Klopp, Virgil van Dijk breaks a fingernail and it's all, we're going to lose and what have you. But what really sort of worries me sometimes, like I said before, is the performance. I mean, I know, for example, I had a sort of, we had difference of opinion, shall I say, with the co-presenter when we were talking about the Randers, the second leg. I know it was a dead match, as good as a dead match, although you don't never know with Leicester. And we did score after a couple of minutes, which kind of killed it off. But we were letting a team, and no disrespect to Randers, of that sort of standard. They had nearly over 20-odd shots at our goal. Now, yes, we won 3-1, we went through 7-2, and, it all looks rosy. But if you, and even Leeds on Saturday, or Sunday, whenever it was, they, Saturday, I think it was, but they had 20-odd shots on goal. Now, if you're giving that, and I know the only stat that really matters is how many times the ball goes in the net, but if you're giving that sort of, possession and shot attempts at clubs like Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, you're going to get stuffed, aren't you? It's going to be like a 9-0 in reverse.
Yeah, and it comes down to leadership as well, doesn't it? Because it's not just about injuries to a certain number of players; it's injuries to leaders within the squad as well. So, I mean, what Brendan Rodgers, and I know he hasn't blamed injuries, and I agree with what you're saying there. Although what he has mentioned is the fact that he has lost a lot of leadership, a lot, in the side. So when Evans isn't in the side, he's one of those defenders that improves other players. Soyuncu looks so much more comfortable next to Johnny Evans, doesn't he? And I think, in fairness, even though he's a young guy, Wesley Fofana is another type of defender who improves those around him. It raises the standards of everybody else. And what can happen in not just Leicester, but any side, is if you lose some of the key leadership within any kind of squad, then what you find is then you have players sinking to below their own standards, and they are not able to raise themselves back up, and that can happen anywhere. But if you're losing the likes of Vardy, and you're losing the likes of Evans as well, who are very much two key leaders in the group, then that can happen. And I can see why that would be a real struggle.
And we have all this doom and gloom about the fact that we're not doing well. I mean, it wasn't so long ago when, being in Europe and finishing the top 10 was absolutely, over the moon for us. But I have a section on most shows that I do. It's a bit of fun, but it's like, when did Spurs last win a trophy? It's a bit like, I think on the Drive Time show, they used to have a daily Arsenal. I have the when did Spurs last win a trophy? But if we look at it, let me just bring this back up again here. I mean, we last won a trophy 297 days ago. They don't include the Community Shield in that as a trophy, although, again, regular viewers to the show will know that it's not the Community Shield in my eyes, it's the English Super Cup. But, that's by the by. But, Arsenal, it's been nearly 2 years. Man United, nearly 5. Spurs, over 14. And Villa and Everton, who were two clubs that a while ago you would have said would have been challenging for European, 25 and 26 years apiece. Yeah. And I could have put Newcastle on there, and that would go even further back. Things aren't that bad.
No, they're not. And but what I would say is, Leicester's owners are determined to set the standards higher than, hey, let's finish in the top 10 and that's great.
Yes.
So they released the accounts recently, and one of the key quotes coming out of that from the club was, this is a football club that wants to break the glass ceiling of that quote unquote big six, and challenge on a regular basis. To do that, they have to continue to defy, for want of a better phrase, football's kind of financial gravity, in that you have in those big six, including Arsenal and Spurs and Man City, Man United, and then Liverpool, Chelsea, clubs that are spending at least 100 million more a year on wages than Leicester City can offer. Yes. And so to carry on doing that, you have to continually show improvement, and this is where the worry comes from. So if Leicester City don't get into Europe next season, let's say they're not in Europa League because they haven't won the Conference League, or they haven't managed to claw their way to 7th, and that somehow is good enough, then it seems pretty obvious that Youri Tielemans is going to go. But how many other players would then say, you know what, I could play Champions League football somewhere else, and is this going to happen for me at Leicester City? And that's the worry that fans will rightly have, because yes, you can build through the next the next generation, and Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall looks like a wonderful replacement for Youri Tielemans if and when indeed.
I say that I'm not so worried about Tielemans leaving because we've got Dewsbury-Hall.
Well, I mean, he's doing a remarkable job at the moment, and if he keeps it up, then that may well be something that Leicester fans don't have to worry about so much. But that's the issue, and they're always going to be fighting until you are regularly in Europe yourself, and you get the bounties of either the Champions League or, to a lesser extent, the Europa League. Then you are always going to be fighting this uphill battle against clubs that do have the resources available to do that. I mean, this is why the stadium rebuild is so important. So I heard a stat ages ago. I can't remember where it's from, But when they built the Emirates, that middle ring of like 9,000 or so padded seats at the Emirates, that brings into Arsenal more money than the whole of Highbury did on a match day. So, if you have Leicester City, and at the moment, let's say the new stand goes up, and there's more executive boxes immediately. That's extra cash. Might have a few more plush seats. You might have a few more bars and places where fans might go. And it's interesting, reading the questionnaire that was sent out must have been a year or so ago about would you like this kind of facility or that kind of facility and all that sort of stuff. What would you want in the stand? And I guess there was a kind of a marketing push to see what people would want to spend their money on and how much demand there would be for sort of extra services in that area, because that is all about generating the necessary revenue that would then allow Leicester to challenge a bit more in terms of the wage bill and a bit further in terms of trying to close that gap. So, but all that relies on continuous development on the pitch. So if you miss out on Europe one season, okay, but if that becomes 2 or 3, and then other clubs, you've got Newcastle on the rise, haven't you? I mean, it won't be too long before they start challenging at that end of the table. Aston Villa under Steven Gerrard, could they be a rising force in the next 2 or 3 years as well, or maybe sooner? Then you start looking around, and of course Wolves are doing so well this season as well. So there's so many clubs nipping at Leicester's heels, trying to be that side that is challenging everyone else in the top 6. So that's where the pressure comes from. But I really like the fact that Leicester's owners are being so positive in that this is our aim, this is what we want to do, this is what we demand of the club. And because they set those standards, I think it's okay for fans to be disappointed when Leicester don't meet them, because that is the standards the club are setting. So we can have this conversation about Leicester being in great times and this being a bit of a disappointing season, and it's not the end of the world. And it's right, it's not. Yeah. But this is the club that is making demands of itself and wanting to be pushing further and further.
And it has to be,
and that's what it needs to do.
Yeah, and I think it has to be, like you say. I mean, we played Leeds at the weekend, and I did a watch along. And I had 90 minutes with the Leeds fans. I do my watch alongs with fans of the opposing club. It makes it a bit more interesting. And we were talking about sort of their rise under David O'Leary and Peter Ridsdale, and they went about it in the right. We're going to spend, and it all went wrong because they didn't go into Europe and as far as they wanted to. And it is a case of just getting it right. And it does amaze me how many teams get it wrong when they keep saying to us, "Oh, it's a business now, and we're run by businessmen and men that have their own business." And then you get somebody like Spurs come along, and they end up getting their 8th choice, 9th choice manager. You sack your manager, and then you don't have an idea about who you want to get in. And I mean, sure they must do. You leave your job, you give 4 weeks notice, so people start looking around. And if you are at work and you are being, your boss thinks that, he's not doing so well, might have to sort of move him or let. Immediately, his next thought is, right, but who would I replace him with? And I mean, Watford are just the epitome of getting it wrong.
Well, I mean, it is an extraordinary model, the Watford model, and it has brought limited success. I mean, it's got them into the Premier League, but it's not kept them there. And the one thing you can say about Leicester is they do have this identity and a plan, and they are building in the right way. They're doing it the right way around. The training ground is such a key thing for Leicester growing as a club, because you imagine showing that to when you recruit, saying, right, this is where you go to work every day. Yes. That is the place, and that has got to widen the eyes of a lot of players that might be thinking of maybe going to Wolves or going to Newcastle, or the clubs that Leicester are trying to stay ahead of in this race to break into the top 6. So they are doing it the right way around, and the academy as well is going to be a key part of that. I mean, what was it? 4 academy products in the lineup against Leeds in terms of what that they are doing so well
with 6 under-23s on the pitch where we played Watford in the FA Cup because of COVID and what have you. And let's face it, they did a darn sight better than the first team that turned up against Nottingham Forest. But I need to stop talking about Nottingham Forest. Although my therapist does say it's good to talk, but I don't think it is with that.
No, let's just all delete that game from our memories. I think that's the best thing.
Yeah. Limited memories. We joked before about Martin O'Neill, and I suppose that was the last time, apart from Ranieri, when we had relative success in living memory. But like you made the quote, and I was thinking it. Martin O'Neill said he used to sort of welcome players walking onto the pitch backwards.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like you say, we do attract those big names. I think, not the big names, but the attraction of, like you say, taking somebody to the training ground and them seeing that is and it is because. You made the point again just now, and I agree 100%. The last couple of seasons, maybe we've had it all our own way a bit. And, that you need a Spurs or an Arsenal or something like that to struggle to sort of get in there. But it really was only us. And maybe West Ham were just nipping at our toes last season. But this season, like you say, there's a lot more clubs now that are fighting for that position that we used to think it was only us fighting for.
Yeah, and you're right to raise West Ham. I can't believe I didn't mention them earlier. So yeah, you're absolutely you're bang on to do that. I suppose the interesting thing now is with Roman Abramovich leaving Chelsea presumably in the next few weeks or months. What does that mean for the future for Chelsea and their ability to spend? So that could open things up as well. It's going to be curious to see how that sort of develops. And yeah, I think we look at football sometimes as if the way it is now is the way that it always has been or will be. But, I remember listening to phone-ins. I've always remembered this call. It's from the early 2000s when Manchester United were just completely dominant. They'd won the league by sort of mid-March and stuff.
Yeah.
And someone called up and said, look, Manchester United should start next season with a minus 10 points just to make it interesting. I don't think they were being completely serious, but it just sort of showed the level of dominance there was. And it did look at the time like they would be this unstoppable force that would, just continue to dominate English football forever. And it's not been like that at all. When Pep Guardiola leaves Manchester City, what's their plan after that? Who do they get in? How are they going to look? Jurgen Klopp won't be at Liverpool forever. Everything is evolving. It's always moving pieces. And the same will be true of Leicester City. It's not a fixed point in time. This will be something that changes over time. And if you've got the right strategies in place, then you can keep up. But not every club will have that.
No, and again, it is. Have you read my notes, by the way? But I always say that Man United. You can't argue. Alex Ferguson was a master coach, master manager, and what he did at Manchester United was unbelievable. And for that time he was there, they were certainly to the best club in Europe. I mean, forget the Champions League, but overall, he'd gotten work. But before that, and after sort of Matt Busby, they were just another just another Tottenham or Arsenal at the moment. It was Liverpool that were dominant, and Liverpool that were winning everything, that were winning the European finals and the titles. But then it's taken them 30 years to get back to where they are. And, like I say, I know, a lot of fans these days don't sort of remember that far back, and maybe that's why they're more expectant. But it does go round in circles. And like you say, they have that old boot room going where the assistant managers always moved up. As soon as they stopped doing that, and I think they brought Souness in, it kind of all started to go wrong for them. But but I've got a question coming in for you here before we move on to Brendan itself. But just to mention Tielemans. Yeah, I can see what he's doing. I mean, I was reading something on the Leicester Mercury yesterday that was saying that he may still not go depending what happens this season. He obviously wants Champions League football, and I get that, and I will wish him all the best and thank him for everything he's done. I mean, the FA Cup final, that moment I had with my son, thank you so much, although maybe VAR maybe just helped a little bit as well. But, he's been captain. We need leaders on the pitch. But Amartey been a bit of a Vestergaard the last few seasons. I remember when we were walking up to the Charity Shield at Wembley and they announced the team and everybody went, when they announced Amartey. But he has stood up and come into his own this season.
Yeah.
I know you were saying Soyuncu and Evans. would you say when Fofana comes back, I suppose the immediate thing is people think drop a Marty, but would you sort of still go with Soyuncu, or would you keep?
You know what? I'm really torn about that. I mean, it was a question I asked actually Matt Piper after the Leeds game, and I don't know the answer. I honestly don't know. I mean, I would suspect that the safer option is to go for Fofana and Soyuncu, because they've played together before a lot. There will be that residual understanding between them. You don't have to develop new things. And when you're in a situation where Leicester defensively are particularly fluid in terms of who's in and who's out of the side, you need whatever relationships you can get. And that may just sway it. But that is not to do down the contribution of Daniel Amartey this season and the way he stepped into that role, because at times he's been really excellent. So I recognise that is a hugely difficult choice. I suspect it may be for Fofana Soyuncu that would be the combination that Brendan Rodgers went with.
Yes.
But I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if it was the other way around.
You can't. I can remember, again, going back to Nigel Pearson, when we were in the Championship and we won it and we broke all the records. You could predict what that team was going to be sort of 6-7 weeks in advance for a game, because it was the same day. Then he came up, and after Man United, and you were saying about your interview with him and the next match against Palace, but you then suddenly, he was changing every week, and somebody would have a good game. And we're going to come on to the defence later, because that's obviously been one of the big problems this season. Brad, good evening. You see, I've said it now. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, goodbye. I'll cover every base. Brendan has signalled out KDH as a potential future captain, and I don't think he's not wrong there. Scott, good afternoon. Welcome along, Scott. Thanks for joining us. Brad has asked this question. It's a good one. What's why we're talking about the defence? Fofana has stated that he wants to win more silverware with the club, but he's also said he wanted to help us get the second Prem title. Do you see that as an achievable goal for Leicester City over the next few seasons?
Honestly, no. I think Champions League is an achievable thing for Leicester City if the stars align and Leicester City are able to keep hold of their best talent and have a good season. I think the title is probably it would a bit going back to the conversation we had earlier. It would rely on others all slipping at similar times, and I'm not convinced that's going to happen anytime soon.
It did happen, obviously, 15-16. I mean, Man United were still just being Man United post-Fergie. Spurs had just imploded, as they usually do. Arsenal were looking at their normal top four and nothing more. And of course, Man City announced that Pellegrini was leaving with about 10 games to go, and that was the end of it. But no, I agree. And the worrying thing is that if we do have a really good season, would you say?
Oh, sorry, I missed the question slightly.
Oh, there. Sorry. I say if we do well, and it does look like we're going to win it again, they're just going to go out and spend big, more than you said earlier, more than we can.
Well, I mean, there is always that danger, but it's a great bit of news this week that Fofana's tied down until 2027 because he is, a brilliant defender. He will be a full French international within, not too long as well. I mean, he's going to be a key part of this Leicester side for years to come. You would hope, and if he is, then the future's a very bright one for Leicester City. You would think.
Moving on, as we have to Brendan Rodgers, and we spoke about this before. Third season syndrome. It's what everybody's been saying to us. All the Liverpool fans are saying, he had a bad third season with us. I think you only get third season syndrome if you don't give the guy a chance to have a fourth season. And season one, he got us to fifth in the Europa League. Season two, fifth again, Europa League again, which we've never had two consecutive European seasons ever before. FA Cup, we know that. Community Shield, English Super Cup. There's been 2 great years. But, when he signed, I saw him as not a short-term manager, which a lot tend to be these days, but somebody that's going to build something, because he is good with the youth. And if he is building something, then he has to be given the time to build it, And, what Ferguson did Sir Alex did at Man United was he rebuilt the team 3 or 4 times during his tenure. And maybe that's something, I know Brendan's alluded to it, but maybe that's something he is going to be doing.
Yeah, and that was a card that he sort of handed out after the Forest game, and there's only so many times you can play that card in the media, but that was certainly, if you're going to play it, then that was maybe the day to do it. Yes. And he was right in terms of the attitude of some of the performance from Leicester's players that day. It wasn't anywhere near good enough, and I think you learn a fair bit about players in defeats like that sometimes, about who's really up for the fight and who isn't. In terms of a third season syndrome, though, I think a lot of this just comes from that third season at Liverpool, in which he lost Suarez, one of the best strikers in the Premier League, and all of a sudden, that had a huge impact on what Liverpool were doing. It didn't have a third season syndrome at Celtic, as far as I'm aware. I think they won the title that year. I don't think he had a third season syndrome at Swansea because he left. Yes. I'm not sure it's a narrative I completely buy into. No. I don't think there's enough evidence to really to back it up. I think people have just gone, it's gone a bit dicey in the third season at Leicester. Is this a thing? And they've gone back in his past to kind of fit the facts to the narrative rather than anything else.
Doesn't that happen all the time, though? I mean,
we love to do it in football.
Yeah. I mean, I've nailed my colours to the mast. I am a Brendan in. There's been a lot of people saying he should be sacked and we should get him out now. I mean, what's the point? Because whoever you get in's got the same team, got the same injuries. We're not like Leeds are in the relegation battle. And when Claudio went, and I think he had to go when he went because we were in danger of going down. But like I say, he's building something here. Let him get to the summer, see what money he's got, see if Tillerman's probably goes, so he may well have that money. And let's judge. And I think it was Clinton Morrison on the BBC, and it was very, very true. He said, judge Brendan Rodgers when he's got a full-strength team.
Mm. Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, there's a couple of things, really, isn't there? I mean, one, there is clearly no loss of, this team is playing for its manager.
Yeah.
You only have to look at the way they've ground out that win over Leeds and the win at Burnley to see, and even in that defeat at Wolves, which they played pretty well in, but, got done with a couple of sucker punch goals. And, this is not a team that is not playing for its manager. So, that's the first thing. I would be worried if you saw evidence otherwise, but at the moment, I'm not seeing that. And I don't think there's too much of a case you can make to say that that's happening. But the other thing is, it's all very well, and I have these conversations all the time on football phone-ins when I've hosted them, is fine. If you want to get rid of a manager, okay, who do you want? Who are you realistically going to get? And that's fine to say. You've got to have an alternative. You can't just be saying this guy's got to go. You've got to take responsibility for it and go, right, okay, what next? Because otherwise, I don't see the point of it.
No. As Brad says there, and he's naming all the youngsters, you need the right manager to do that. And I think Brendan is. He started with youth players, and that is one of his strengths. But do you think at times he's too stubborn? And I mean, we were talking about Nigel Pearson before, and there's probably nobody is more stubborn than him. But how long did we persist with zonal marking at the back when it obviously wasn't working? I can remember listening to one match, and I think it was on BT, and the guy said, Leicester have given whoever we were playing a corner for the opposition. That's as good as Leicester conceding a goal. 2 seconds later, the ball was in our net. And he's finally changed it. And all right, we know that Leeds, couldn't have hit a barn door at the weekend, but he stuck with that for so long with the zonal marking when it was so obvious it wasn't working.
Yeah, and I think ultimately what can sometimes be seen as stubbornness within managers, I think is just actually these are my principles. And this is the way I believe in playing the game. This is the way I believe in setting this up. And this is the job you brought me in to do. When I told you in my interview, this is how I was going to do it. Do you know what I mean? So kind of expecting people to turn on a sixpence is maybe a little bit I don't know, a little bit
naive.
Hard to do. But also you're right. I mean, Nigel Pearson did change it up in the end in that season that they stayed up, and they went to the three at the back, and it became a different sort of team. They became much more on the front foot, and less. They played with ambition rather than just fear, and it worked. But I think Brendan Rodgers, of any manager, is probably not one that I would necessarily accuse of being stubborn in a tactical approach. I mean, he's changed the way that Leicester, try and set up and play several times within his time here. It's not like he's gone, right, I play 4-3-3 and this is what we do, and it doesn't matter who we're playing or whatever's happening. They will match and change things within games, and they will work it out. I mean, Hamza Chowdhury essentially is a right back. At the weekend, so I'm not sure. I get the set pieces thing, and it's really difficult to watch sometimes. But there's no telling, how much worse it would be if they tried to go man marking. Because the other thing about football punditry is you never hear anyone on Sky or BT post match going, "Oh, the man marking system, it's terrible. They've got to switch to zonal." When was the last time you ever heard anyone say that?
Well, funnily enough, the Leeds fan, because he said that Marsh is very much a zonal marking fan, but I know what you mean. You never hear it mentioned normally, do you? No.
So I don't know. But yeah, look, it's clearly a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
Hopefully, with the return of a couple of players, that will go some way towards doing it.
And I guess, one person's stubborn is another person's focused.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the best, I think the best managers generally are those that have their principles and stick to them. Pep Guardiola's gone the entire season without a striker. Everyone told him he was nuts.
Yeah.
And he's gonna probably win the Premier League without a striker, and it's like, no, this is the way I'm going to play the game, and it's up to everyone else to do better than us, and no one is.
Yeah.
So I much prefer a manager who says these are my principles and this is what we're going to do, rather than a manager who maybe came in and said, well, these are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have others.
Yes. Yeah. We've got to come on to it. It's been a horrendous season injury-wise. I've never known a season like it. I think at one point we had 8 or 9 defenders have all at some point been injured during the season. You say that to opposing fans because we said before that Brendan's not one to sort of shout out and say, well, we've had all these injuries, unlike some other managers. But, I mean, if we have a look here at, this is the list, and I may well have missed people off, I don't know, but this is the list of,
It's difficult to keep track.
Yeah, Justin Fofana, Soyuncu, Evans, Ricardo, Castagna, Vestergaard, Bertrand. That's just the defence. And you got Barnes, Madison, Ndidi, Samari, Vardy, Daka. I mean, what club? I mean, you've got to look and say, look, all right, we're 12th, but we've got a couple of games in hand. We're in the last 16 of a European competition. And he's done that with all those injuries.
Yeah, and I think that just underlines the points that we've been making earlier. There are very few clubs in the top flight that will be able to cope with that. So it's not great. It really isn't.
Do you think that he's, we've accused him of, well, we never know whether we're playing a back 3 or a back 4 or 5, whatever way it goes. Almost like he goes in on a sort of a Friday night and says, right, who's not injured?
Well, yeah.
Right, well, we're going to go through it at the back because we've got these three that aren't injured, and everybody else is.
Yeah, well, I mean, Vestergaard is the one that relies on being in a three more than the others, largely, and I think that is to cover, the relative lack of pace. But the others, I think, are more adjustable. But yeah, I mean, there have been times when they've played a back three with one centre half and two fullbacks.
Yes,
for example, because that was essentially the best of
available.
The best of the bad options. There weren't any better options. They're all bad. We just got to pick one. So I know what you mean.
And you mentioned Vestergaard there, and he's kind of become. Leicester always seem to, we love. And I've fallen into this trap. We love to hate at least one player every season. It was Chilwell for one season. Even when he was England left back, he wasn't good enough. And, Vestergaard's taken a lot of stick since he's come. But I suppose when you look at it, he's got to be introduced to his playing partners every game. Like, who am I playing with? Oh, this guy. Or who is he?
It can't. Yeah, it can't have been easy.
No.
I don't want to write the guy off. Because they're making Jamie Vardy didn't have a particularly good first season at Leicester City.
No.
And look, Yannick Vestergaard is not Jamie Vardy, but the idea that he's a busted flush and Leicester should just get rid. I think it's too early to say that potentially.
And I think how often, and maybe because I'm old, but when a team bought a player years and years ago. I think this was the case when Keegan went from Scunthorpe to Liverpool. It was quite a while before he went anywhere near the first team. Nowadays, you buy a player and they're straight in and they're expected to play with people they don't know. And he got injured as well. But, Brad, he sort of says he's a co-presenter, sort of. Probably didn't expect to get as much game time as he did when he was signed.
And the problem is once players are brought into a realm where everyone is waiting for their next mistake, nobody remembers anything good that they did. So to go back to that Chilwell example, every time he lost the ball, that was all people remembered. They didn't remember, the brilliant challenges or the assists or the other wonderful things that have made him go, be a player at Chelsea who's won the Champions League for goodness sake and play for England. The idea that he was a bad player was nonsense. But once you get framed in a certain way, it then becomes difficult for people to see it in any other way, and I feel very sorry for players when that happens, because I think it's just not a well-rounded understanding of anyone's game.
No, totally. And like I say, hopefully, like you say, he's with us for a few seasons. Was he a bit of a panic buy? I gave praise to the club and to Brendan, because we'd got the injury to Fofana in a so-called friendly. Obviously, that word doesn't translate into Spanish very well. But, Fofana was injured, out for most of the season, they realised straight away. With the other pop injuries that we were having at the time, they did act very quickly and went to get cover in. Do you think Vestergaard, and we know that Brendan's, he'd been linked with him for a few windows. Do you think had we not been in such a panic, we might not have got him? Or
well, yeah, I don't think there's any question that if Wesley Fofana doesn't get his a double fracture in pre-season, that Leicester are buying Yannick Vestergaard. I don't think he's a guy that you bring in for any other reason. But you have to assume that he was on a long list and then a short list of Leicester's recruitment, and they were looking at him anyway for those very reasons, because you continually have to be going, well, what if? Leicester City at the moment will have a list of, what if James Maddison is out for a season? What if we lose Harvey Barnes for 6 months? What happens if, X, Y, or Z player leaves? Who is the next cab in the rank for want of a better expression? So presumably all that due diligence had been done, but not every transfer works out.
No. And as we will see in a moment.
So that side of it, and again, Ryan Bertrand's another example of, it's not really worked for him so far, and the performance that sticks out in my mind was at Napoli, where it just that was a poor night for him. For an experienced defender, you would have hoped for better. But again, hopefully that won't be the abiding memory of those players, because they'll be able to contribute something more positive.
I thought he was a very good signing, because I thought he'd bring that experience in when Evans wasn't there. We'd lost two experienced and talkative defenders in Morgan and Fuchs. Ade hasn't worked out, but he's had his injuries as well. But just to finish on injuries, Dave Richardson. I mean, he was the physio for as long as I can remember. He was probably there when they first got together in the shed on First Street, whatever it was. He went, and that's coincided with a lot of injuries. Would you link those two together? I mean, we went the whole season when we won the league with hardly any injuries.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. There's just not enough. I mean, obviously the correlation is there, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the reason. And I just think it's impossible to say, or to with any kind of confidence that yes, that is the reason why Leicester City have picked up so many injuries. I mean, you mentioned the season Leicester won the league. They were out of the League Cup very early. The FA Cup campaign, from memory, didn't go on for too long. And they weren't in Europe. So they played 44 games maybe that season, if that. Compared to a European campaign, League Cup, FA Cup, and everything that Leicester City have got on this season. When you're playing again Sunday, Thursday, and all that sort of stuff, that load on players has got to be a part of it too. The fact that you've come out of a year where obviously pandemic has led to one season being cut short, and then kind of sandwiched onto the end of the start of the next season. So players haven't had any time off really as well. So I suspect those are just as big factors, if not bigger factors than any behind the scenes stuff.
Totally good point. And you could argue that we haven't had the squad, depth or size, but we're working within budgets that now Newcastle and Man City and Liverpool, we can't dream of those sort of budgets. But when you look at the youngsters that are on the bench, again, you don't have to go out and buy. And in a way, I'm glad we didn't buy anybody in January, because we knew we'd got players coming back. January, and everybody throws Tillemans at me, but apart from that, January signings and quite often don't work out. They're not who you really want. They're more of a panic buy. So in a way, I'm quite glad. And it was amazing how many clubs more clubs didn't buy than actually bought.
Yeah, and well, I guess part of that is, you're right. It's very much a seller's market in January, because you can demand whatever you want if a club is desperate to get someone in. But also, again, footballers, as we've been seeing now with the raft of various clubs' accounts that are coming out, everyone has been hemorrhaging money for the last 2 years because of COVID and the impacts that has had. So there's been a natural withdrawal there as well from a bit of spending from outside. Again, the clubs that are independently wealthy and pandemic proof. So then there's that's also got to be part of it too.
Yes, yeah. I don't know there's nothing coming up yet on the internet, but apparently Rodgers has just said in his press conference that Vardy's out for a few weeks. There's great, but I haven't seen anything coming up, as I say, at the moment. So we will wait and see. Like I say, it's just literally he must have been doing his press conference. But I wanted to come on last
now.
Yeah,
a knee injury, according to my friend James Sharp at the Mail, which is so that is not great news.
I mean,
City-wise.
It's just one thing after another, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's what worries me with these injuries, is not that we're getting them injuries. It's how many injuries are happening, not in matches.
Mm.
This
Vardy injury appears to have been picked up in the Leeds game,
right?
According to what's been said here. I'm just reading what's been coming up on the Radio Leicester Sport Twitter feed. A quote from Rodgers: "It's very frustrating for him, particularly having been out for so long, to get back. You see the difference he makes too, because we miss that level of player. Hints he could be out for 3 to 4 weeks. Vardy. James Justin is available for selection. James Maddison also free to return, but Ricardo is not quite ready to play. So there's your team news."
Live as we do it, live on Leicester TV, and of course we mustn't forget Castagna. I mean, we've not seen him for a while.
Another quality player.
Yeah. And I might have this wrong, but just to finish on this, we did mention it about signings, because there's been a lot of rumours, and again, I have to say they are rumours, and no industry likes rumours more than football. We've got so many radio stations, so many TV shows, we've got all these platforms like this one, and papers that we've got to fill it with something, But the rumours are that Brendan doesn't always listen to the scouting system, and we know the scouting system at Leicester is so good. I mean, yes, we've lost Lee Congleton, but then we lost Steve Walsh, and we were still, finding the gems. And I know Everton fans were really disappointed with Steve Walsh, and he didn't really find them many gems. But it's not just one person. Our scouting system, it's all of them. And Tielemans is. I mean, these are the signings that I think I've got right under Brendan Rodgers. Tielemans. He signed him permanently under Brendan Rodgers, but of course he did come in the pro range. But I mean, okay, Perez, well, that's a show on its own, isn't it? And we've discussed Bertrand and Vestergaard. Then we've got Under and Bennett. Now, you could say that maybe those were the 5 that have struggled, or I mean, some of them were loans, obviously. But when you look on the other side, Fofana, Castagna.
Yeah.
Daka, Samari, Pratt, Justin, Lookman, who I hope will get a permanent. I think he could finally be the stopper saying, "Oh yeah, we miss Mahrez." I put Lookman down there twice just because I think he's that good.
well, once as a loan and once hopefully on a permanent deal.
Yes, that's it, exactly. Thank you for digging me out of that one there. Every team has bad signings, don't they?
Yeah, look, the idea that every recruitment department gets every decision right. Look, I mean, every club will be having a similar sort of discussion from what they did last summer, what worked and what didn't. And there are going to be misses as well as hits, because this is not an exact science. As much as we like to pretend that you can do all the analysis and scouting, and ultimately, until you get a player in the environment, you're not necessarily exactly sure how it's all going to work out, and ultimately you're dealing with human beings, not robots. The long-term trend is are you getting more hits than misses? And ultimately for Leicester, they're still at the stage where are you able to bring players in at a fairly low price and sell them on for more? So look, James Justin, not that he's for sale or I've heard anything about him being for sale, but what was it, 8 million from Luton?
Yes.
In a season's time, what would you get for him? A lot more than that. I
know he's coming under 5 at the moment, but look at Maguire.
Yeah, Daka. Again, it was a big money move, but after a couple of seasons in the Premier League, if he's done well, a lot more valuable than that. So Castagna again is another one who would certainly go for more than Leicester paid for him. There is that side of it too, because ultimately, whilst they don't, and Leicester are keen to point out they don't have to sell, it certainly helps if they do. To bring in the next generation that keeps building this on, and this is it's a model that Brentford have done on a much more aggressive level, done so brilliantly. But Leicester still need to do a bit of that, you would think.
They do, but I think everybody's sort of. I mean, last summer Maddison was off to. According to Arsenal fans, Maddison was off to Arsenal. How did that work out? I think the thing is that yes, we will sell, but only if we have to and the price is right. Where before we had to sell to get, to get the money in to keep us going, to be honest with you. Where now, like I say, if we sell, it's our decision.
Yes,
if we sell.
And I think, that's right. And you've got to take into account as well. Will players be happy and healthy?
Yes.
If they are kept at Leicester City when they want to go as well, and does that upset, the dressing room and things around the training ground as well? If you end up having people who aren't happy at the club, so that is also clearly going to be part of the conversation as well.
You might even find the odd player camping out at Paris Airport. Allegedly, and don't let me just drop anybody in it at all.
Couldn't possibly comment.
No, exactly. I must learn these press speaks. Just want to end on this one, then, if I can, is because if it looks like Tielemans will be leaving if we don't get any form of European football, and I kind of get, even if we get the Conference League, he'll still want to go. He wants to play at that level. Can you see Pratt coming back, Dennis Pratt? Because he was a fantastic player. I know he's on loan at Atlanta at the moment, but he couldn't get in the team mainly because of Tielemans. Could he have a comeback, or do you think he really wants out?
But then is Dewsbury Hall going to be the man that takes on that mantle? So I think that's an open question, really. I'm not convinced that he would be the guy that would come back and immediately fit in. And again, it depends on how he feels the year abroad has done for him as well on loan, and whether he's happy to go and leave the club again. So there's that side of it too. And again, the other thing we should mention actually is just to go back to those signings as well. The thing that we've not mentioned is, of course, Brendan Rodgers is so good at bringing through young players too.
Yes.
And so look at the improvement in Harvey Barnes. Look at the improvement, obviously, in Dewsbury Hall, who has been a bit of a late developer. He was at Luton last year and was doing ever so well. And there was questions about whether he should come back or not. It's clearly been judged extremely well as to when he comes and becomes part of the team. Luke Thomas at a much earlier age has come in at left back, but again, he's now a very valuable asset for Leicester City as well. So it's not just about the recruitment inside, it's how you develop what you've already got too. And Brendan Rodgers has proven time and again that he's very, very good at doing that.
Look, was it 15 youth players we signed a few weeks ago? Yeah, you don't necessarily need to go and spend big if you can produce your own grown players, and that's something we've got to look at. Really, final question, and I thank you for coming on, but what can you see Leicester finishing with this season?
I think the interesting question for Leicester City is not so much, because you look at the league table and go, what can Leicester catch Spurs? They're 9 points behind Spurs at the moment, having played the same number of games, or they were until Monday night when they thrashed Everton. I don't think Leicester are trying to catch Spurs. I think it's, can you catch West Ham? 12 points behind West Ham, 3 games in hand. And if Leicester could put a run together, that is, I think, the target that is achievable to maybe get 7th.
Yeah.
That and I think that's an outside chance, because I've learned not to trust Leicester so much this season in terms of the performances that we're seeing, and that is.
We are Leicester, and like we said at the start, it is a roller coaster ride.
Yeah. Although for a couple of glorious years, I was starting to feel quite confident going into games. That is now maybe not so much the case. So yeah, what is it? Look, I think if they finish 8th or 9th, and they give it a good go in the Conference League, I would be, from this position, satisfied with that. But of course, next season, then the pressure is on to start well and to see what this rebuild that Brendan Rodgers is looking at actually delivers.
And you see Rodgers still being here to do that next season.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I don't see any reason for him to leave or to be pushed at this point. I'd be very surprised if he's not Leicester manager at the start of next season.
Yeah, I mean, I want him to be, and I think when you look at post FA Cup win, how he was with Top, it is, amazing. And, we should say top, what he has done since his father passed. He could so easily have walked away. He hasn't done. And I think that is one thing that everybody else, every other team goes, we have, I think, got the best owners in the country.
And again, that's something that came out in the accounts. It's not just King Power that is loaning Leicester City money at the moment. It's coming from top personally. So, this is something that is worth pointing out too. The investment that continues to happen in the club. And you're right, it could have been something that he could have walked away from. I don't think anyone would have blamed him if he had. Yeah. But the fact that he continues to support the club the way that he has, I think Leicester can count themselves extremely fortunate to have him.
I'm so looking forward to the new stadium and all the media site and everything around it. It's going to be. Maybe then some people say we're a big club. I don't know. Look, Mike, thank you so much for spending the time.
Absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
It goes on. I didn't think I was going to keep you this long, so I do apologise. But once you start talking football, you can't stop, can you?
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much for coming on. All the best to you and your family. Good luck with the building work and stay safe.
Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Thanks to Mike there for joining us. It's always great, like I said at the start, to get a professional view and on what goes on, and maybe a little few secrets as well. But no, thanks to Mike. Remember, you can catch him on BBC Radio 5 Live, Radio Leicester. You're possibly going to be back next month, April, on there and commentating on some games for talkSPORT. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to be back at 7 o'clock tonight when we're going to have the Wrens preview. Fingers crossed there that we can do something against them and take a lead back to their place. We will see. Thanks very much to everybody that joined in. I say a huge big thank you to Mike as well. I will see you later on, like I say, 7 o'clock. Stay safe and remember, don't do anything I wouldn't enjoy. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for watching Leicester Till I Die. This is Chris saying goodbye and see you next time.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.